The Germans fled a city because of one man, not because of an army, not because of artillery, not because of tanks, because of a 24-year-old Canadian corporal, wearing an eye patch and carrying a bag of grenades. On the night of April 13, 1945, one soldier walked into the German-occupied city of Zwolle, in the Netherlands. By dawn, the entire German garrison had evacuated, and 50,000 Dutch civilians were free. This is not a legend. This is not an exaggeration. This is documented history. This is the story of Corporal Léo Major of the Régiment de la Chaudière, a man who refused to accept the word impossible, who turned grief into fury, and fury into liberation. The story of how one Canadian soldier liberated an entire city alone, and why his name is remembered in the Netherlands but barely known in his own country. April 13, 1945, 9:30 in the evening, outskirts of Zwolle, Netherlands. Two Canadian soldiers moved through the darkness toward a city under Nazi occupation for 5 years. Corporal Léo Major and Private Wilfred Arsenault moved silently through enemy territory. They had volunteered for a reconnaissance mission to scout German positions before a planned artillery bombardment. Intelligence estimates ranged from several hundred to over 1,500 Wehrmacht troops. The next morning, Canadian artillery would pound the city into rubble before the infantry attack. 50,000 Dutch civilians lived in Zwolle, trapped between the Germans and the coming bombardment. Major and Arsenault had made a private decision that went far beyond their orders. They would try to liberate Zwolle themselves to save the city from destruction. It was an insane plan, something no rational soldier would attempt. But Léo Major was not a rational soldier. Léo Major was born on January 23, 1921, in New Bedford, Massachusetts. His parents were French-Canadian, and the family moved back to Montreal when Léo was a child. He grew up in a tough working-class neighborhood during the Great Depression. In 1940, at 19 years old, Léo enlisted in the Canadian Army. He joined the Régiment de la Chaudière, a French-Canadian infantry regiment with a proud history. Finally, on June 6, 1944, D-Day arrived. The Régiment de la Chaudière landed on Juno Beach as part of the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division. During a reconnaissance mission on D-Day itself, Léo captured a German half-track armored vehicle alone. Inside, Canadian intelligence found German communication equipment and secret army codes. Days later, Léo encountered a patrol of 4 SS soldiers and killed all 4 in a firefight. But one dying SS soldier managed to ignite a phosphorus grenade before he fell. The grenade exploded in Léo's face, covering him with burning chemical fire. Burning phosphorus seared his left eye, destroying his vision permanently. Medical officers told him his war was over, and he would be sent home to Canada. Léo Major refused to go. He told doctors he only needed one eye to sight a rifle. From that point forward, Léo Major fought the rest of World War II wearing an eye patch, a one-eyed French-Canadian pirate hunting Nazis through France and the Netherlands. During the Battle of the Scheldt in October 1944, Léo was sent to find a lost patrol. While searching alone, he spotted 2 German soldiers walking along a dike. He captured the first German and used him as bait to capture the second. He repeated this process throughout the day, using each group of prisoners to lure the next group. By the time Léo returned to Canadian lines, he had captured 93 German soldiers. 93 prisoners taken by one man operating completely alone. His superiors recommended him for the Distinguished Conduct Medal, the second highest award for bravery. But Léo Major refused to accept it. He told his commanding officers that the field marshal who would present the medal was incompetent. So Léo refused the medal on principle, an act of defiance almost unheard of in the military. In February 1945, Léo was helping a chaplain load bodies when the carrier hit a landmine. The explosion threw Léo through the air, and he crashed down hard on his back. The chaplain and driver were killed instantly. Doctors told Léo he had broken his back in 3 places and broken 4 ribs and both ankles. A week later, Léo escaped from the hospital. He hid with a Dutch family for nearly a month, letting his injuries heal enough to move. Then he returned to the Régiment de la Chaudière in March 1945. But Léo Major was not finished fighting. By April 1945, the war in Europe was entering its final weeks. The Régiment de la Chaudière was advancing through the northeastern Netherlands. liberating towns. On April 12, 1945, the regiment approached Zwolle. Zwolle was a city of 50,000 people that had been occupied by the Germans since May 1940. Intelligence reports indicated strong German resistance, possibly over 1,000 troops. The Canadian plan was straightforward but brutal. Artillery would bombard the city at dawn on April 14th, softening up German defenses. Then infantry would attack through the rubble and fight house to house until the Germans surrendered. An artillery bombardment would kill hundreds, maybe thousands of innocent Dutch civilians. The commanding officer asked for 2 volunteers to conduct a reconnaissance mission into Zwolle. Léo Major and Wilfred Arsenault immediately volunteered. Wilfred Arsenault, called Willie, was Léo's closest companion in the regiment. They had fought together since D-Day and trusted each other completely. The 2 men left Canadian lines at 9:30 on the evening of April 13th. They carried Sten's submachine guns, grenades, ammunition, and a radio. Their plan had evolved beyond the official orders. Léo and Willie had agreed privately that they would try to liberate Zwolle themselves. If they could somehow convince the Germans to evacuate, the city would be spared destruction. Just after midnight, Léo and Willie approached the outskirts of Zwolle. They stopped at a farmhouse where a Dutch resistance member provided intelligence on German positions. They were approaching a German position when a sentry heard a noise. The German fired blindly into the darkness, machine gun bullets tearing through the night. One of those bullets hit Private Wilfred Arsenault. Willie went down, killed instantly by machine gun fire. Léo Major's best friend was dead, lying in the mud outside Zwolle. And something inside Léo Major snapped. Grief transformed into pure rage. Léo charged the German position alone, firing his Sten gun. He killed the Germans who had fired, then found a weapons cache full of ammunition and grenades. He took Willie's Sten gun, his own weapon, and stuffed his pockets with grenades. Then Léo Major, alone and enraged, walked into the city of Zwolle. It was approximately 1 in the morning on April 14, 1945. The streets were silent and deserted, every civilian hiding indoors under curfew. German soldiers patrolled in small groups, confident in their control of the city. They had no idea what was coming. Léo Major became a one-man army that night. He ran through the streets firing weapons and throwing grenades at every German position he found. He would fire a burst from one gun, then switch to another, creating the illusion of multiple shooters. He threw grenades that exploded in massive flashes, then moved quickly to a new position. The noise was tremendous, echoing through the narrow streets and multiplying the confusion. German soldiers believed they were under attack by a large Canadian force. But it was just one man, one furious Canadian with 2 machine guns and a bag of grenades. At one point, Léo encountered a German officer and told him about the planned artillery bombardment. He said thousands of Canadian troops were surrounding the city, ready to attack at dawn. He explained that the bombardment would destroy Zwolle and kill everyone in it. Then Léo let the officer go to spread the word. Throughout the night, Léo repeated a devastating pattern. He would attack a German position, kill or capture the soldiers, then move to the next target. When he captured groups of 8 to 10 Germans, he would escort them out of the city. He marched them at gunpoint to where French-Canadian troops were waiting outside Zwolle. He turned the prisoners over, then immediately went back into the city to continue fighting. Léo did this multiple times during the night, each time more exhausted but no less determined. Several times during the night, Léo broke into civilian homes to rest briefly. He would apologize to the terrified Dutch families and catch his breath for a few minutes. Then he would leave and continue his rampage through the streets. Léo found the Gestapo headquarters, the feared Nazi secret police building. He set it on fire, watching the flames consume the symbol of Nazi oppression. The fire lit up the night sky, visible across the entire city. German commanders saw the flames and assumed the Canadian attack was even larger than they thought. Later, Léo stumbled upon SS headquarters and engaged them in a firefight. He killed several Nazi officers before the survivors fled. By 4:30 in the morning, Léo Major was exhausted beyond measure. He had been fighting alone for over 6 hours, running through streets, firing weapons, throwing grenades. He contacted members of the Dutch resistance who confirmed what Léo hoped was true. The Germans were evacuating Zwolle. The German garrison, convinced they were facing overwhelming force, had decided to retreat. They were fleeing the city, abandoning it entirely. Zwolle was free. But Léo's work was not finished. He returned to where Willie Arsenault's body lay. Léo lifted his friend's corpse and carried it back to safety. He would not leave Willie behind in enemy territory. Léo Major returned to Canadian lines in the morning on April 14th. He reported to his commanding officer that Zwolle was liberated and the bombardment should be cancelled. The officer stared at Léo in disbelief. One man had liberated an entire city? But scouts confirmed Léo's report, and the Régiment de la Chaudière entered Zwolle unopposed. Dutch civilians poured into the streets crying and cheering, waving orange flags. They had been freed without a single building destroyed, without a single civilian casualty from bombardment. 50,000 people owed their lives to one Canadian soldier. Léo Major was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal for his actions at Zwolle. This time he accepted it. His official citation described his gallant conduct and noted he had patrolled for hours engaging the enemy. It stated that by morning, the enemy garrison was forced to withdraw. The citation did not fully capture the insanity of what Léo had done. How do you describe in official language the fact that one man terrorized an entire German garrison into fleeing? After the war ended in May 1945, Léo Major returned to Canada. He went back to Montreal and resumed his life as a pipe fitter. He never spoke about Zwolle to his family, never mentioned what he had done. His wife and children knew he had served in the war, but he did not share details. But Léo's story did not end with World War II. In June 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea and the Korean War began. Léo Major, now 29 years old and working as a pipe fitter, volunteered again. He joined the 2nd Battalion Royal 22e Regiment, known as the Vendus. Léo was assigned to the Scout and Sniper Platoon, the same type of work he had done in World War II. By November 1951, the Korean War had settled into brutal static warfare. On November 22, 1951, the Vendus were positioned near a strategic feature called Hill 355. The Chinese 64th Army, numbering around 40,000 soldiers, launched a massive assault. The Americans fought desperately but were overwhelmed and pushed off Hill 355. Lieutenant Colonel Jacques Dextraz needed to relieve the pressure immediately. He called for Léo Major. On the night of November 23, 1951, Léo Major assembled his scout and sniper team. 18 men, all volunteers armed with Sten guns and wearing sneakers for silence. Their mission was to infiltrate Hill 355, now held by hundreds of Chinese soldiers. They would climb the snowy hill in darkness, reach the summit, and attack from behind enemy lines. It was another impossible mission, the kind Léo Major specialized in. The team crept up Hill 355 under cover of darkness, moving silently through the snow. Chinese soldiers were everywhere, dug into defensive positions, expecting attack from below. They were not expecting 19 Canadians to appear behind them at the summit. At Léo's signal, the Canadians opened fire with everything they had. Steam guns chattered. Grenades exploded. Chaos erupted across the hilltop. The Chinese soldiers panicked because the gunfire was coming from the center of their own positions. In the confusion and darkness, Chinese units began firing at each other. Léo and his men fought with fury, moving constantly, never staying in one place. They captured Hill 355 and pushed on to take Hill 227 as well. For 3 days and 3 nights, Léo Major and his 18 scouts held those hills. The Chinese launched counterattack after counterattack, trying to retake the strategic positions. Wave after wave of Chinese soldiers charged up the slopes into Canadian machine gun fire. Léo directed mortar fire by radio, calling down barrages on Chinese assault formations. His men were running low on ammunition, exhausted beyond measure, but they held. Finally, after 3 days and nights of continuous combat, reinforcements arrived. They had held 2 strategic hills against a Chinese army that outnumbered them hundreds to 1. For this action, Léo Major was awarded a bar to his Distinguished Conduct Medal. This meant he had earned the Distinguished Conduct Medal twice, an almost unheard-of achievement. Only 3 other Canadian soldiers in history have earned the Distinguished Conduct Medal twice. Léo Major was the only soldier to earn it in 2 different wars. After Korea, Léo Major finally retired from military service. He returned to Montreal and worked as a pipe fitter for the rest of his career. He married and raised a family, living a quiet life in a working-class neighborhood. He still did not talk about the wars, still did not seek attention or recognition. But in the Netherlands, the people of Zwolle never forgot. In 1970, a Dutch official came to thank Léo for liberating Zwolle. He told the Major family what their father had accomplished. Léo's children were shocked. They had never heard any of this. The city of Zwolle named a street after him, Rue Léo Major. They erected a monument in his honor, showing a Canadian soldier overlooking the city. Every year on Liberation Day, April 14th, the Dutch people of Zwolle gather to remember. They tell their children the story of the one-eyed Canadian who saved their city. In 2005, the city of Zwolle invited Léo Major to return for the 60th anniversary of liberation. Léo was 84 years old, frail and using a walker, but he made the journey. Thousands of Dutch people lined the streets to welcome him. They cheered and waved Canadian flags, children threw flowers, and elderly people wept. These were the people Léo had saved 60 years earlier, and their children and grandchildren. The mayor of Zwolle told Léo that without his courage, many in that crowd would never have been born. Their parents or grandparents would have died in the artillery bombardment that never happened. Léo Major, the one-eyed French-Canadian who refused to bow to anyone, had tears in his eyes. Léo Major died on October 12, 2008, at the age of 87. He passed away in Montreal, surrounded by his family. His death was barely noted in Canadian media, just a small obituary in local papers. But in the Netherlands, the news made headlines. Dutch television stations broadcast special programs about Léo's life. Newspapers devoted entire pages to the man who had liberated Zwolle alone. The city of Zwolle held a memorial service, and thousands attended. 2010, 2 years after Léo's death, Canada finally began to recognize what it had lost. The Canadian government declared Léo Major a person of national historic significance. Veterans Affairs Canada created educational materials about his life. Military historians began teaching his tactics at staff colleges. In 2018, the city of Montreal unveiled a bronze statue of Léo Major. The statue shows him wearing his eye patch, carrying his Sten gun, looking ready for anything. School children visit the statue to learn about the man who did the impossible twice. The story of Léo Major matters for several profound reasons. First, it demonstrates that one person can make a difference against impossible odds. Léo was not a general or a politician. He was a working-class pipe fitter from Montreal. He had no special advantages, no elite training, no powerful connections. What he had was courage, determination, and a refusal to accept defeat. When conventional wisdom said something was impossible, Léo proved it could be done. Second, the story shows the power of individual initiative. Léo's orders were to scout Zwolle and report back, that was all. But he saw a better way, a way to save 50,000 civilians from death and destruction. He took the initiative and went far beyond his orders to achieve something greater. Military organizations value following orders, but sometimes the greatest victories come from those who dare to improvise. Third, Léo's story illustrates the importance of knowing when to break the rules. He refused medical evacuation after losing an eye because he knew he could still fight. He escaped from the hospital after breaking his back because he knew the war was not over. He rejected a medal from an incompetent field marshal because he valued integrity over recognition. Léo understood that some rules exist to be broken when the situation demands it. Fourth, the story demonstrates how grief can be transformed into purpose. When Willie Arsenault was killed, Léo could have retreated, could have called for backup. Instead, he channeled his rage and sorrow into action that saved an entire city. He turned personal tragedy into collective liberation. Fifth, Léo Major's humility is as remarkable as his courage. He never sought fame or glory, never wrote memoirs, never appeared on television. He went back to being a pipe fitter and lived quietly for 60 years. That humility, that refusal to brag or boast makes his achievements even more impressive. True heroes do not need to tell everyone they are heroes. Their actions speak for themselves. Finally, the story raises an important question about how we remember heroes. Why did the Netherlands honor Léo Major, while Canada largely forgot him? The Dutch people of Zwolle experienced firsthand what Léo had done for them. They were the 50,000 people who would have died in the artillery bombardment. To them, Léo Major was not just a name in a history book. He was the man who saved their lives. In Canada, most people never heard of Léo Major until long after his death. His story was too unbelievable, too extraordinary to fit into conventional military history. One man liberating an entire city sounds like fiction, like propaganda, like exaggeration. But it is not fiction. It is documented historical fact. Today, Léo Major's legacy lives on in both Canada and the Netherlands. In Zwolle, Rue Léo Major remains one of the most famous streets in the city. The monument to the liberation stands prominently in the city center. Every April 14th, Liberation Day, the people of Zwolle gather to remember the one-eyed Canadian. They tell their children the story so it will never be forgotten. In Canada, schools now teach about Léo Major in history classes. Veterans Affairs Canada includes his story in educational programs about Canadian military history. Military historians study his tactics at the Canadian Forces College and Royal Military College. They analyze how one man created the illusion of overwhelming force using noise, movement, and psychology. They examine how individual initiative can achieve strategic objectives that conventional tactics cannot. The tactical lessons from Zwolle remain relevant in modern warfare. Léo understood that perception matters as much as reality in combat. The Germans did not flee because they were defeated militarily. They fled because they believed they were surrounded. Léo created that belief through audacity, movement, and relentless aggression. He understood that fear and confusion can be weapons as powerful as bullets and grenades. Modern special forces study Léo's tactics as examples of unconventional warfare. His ability to operate alone deep behind enemy lines anticipates modern special operations doctrine. His use of psychological warfare to multiply his effectiveness is now standard special forces training. But beyond the tactical lessons, Léo Major's story resonates because it is fundamentally human. It is about a man who lost his best friend and chose to honor that friendship through action. It is about someone who saw civilians in danger and risked everything to save them. It is about refusing to accept the word impossible when lives are at stake. That night in Zwolle, April 13th to 14th, 1945, everything was against Léo Major. He was alone in an enemy-occupied city, outnumbered hundreds to one. His best friend was dead, he was exhausted, and reinforcements were impossible. Every rational calculation said to retreat, to survive, to accept that some things cannot be done. But Léo Major did not accept that logic. He walked into Zwolle with grief in his heart and grenades in his pockets. He fought for 6 hours through the streets, creating chaos and confusion. He convinced an entire German garrison that they were facing overwhelming force, and when dawn broke over the city, the Germans were gone and 50,000 people were free. The Germans fled a city because of one man, not because of artillery or tanks or air support, because one Canadian soldier refused to accept the impossible, because Léo Major believed that one person with enough courage can change everything. And on that night in Zwolle, he proved it beyond any doubt. Léo Major's story is almost unbelievable, yet it is fully documented and historically verified. It challenges everything we think we know about what is possible in warfare. It reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements come from ordinary people. And it proves that courage, determination, and refusal to quit can overcome any obstacle. The Germans fled a city because of one man, and that man was Léo Major.